And now, last but not the least, I'd like to introduce our very own James Smith. He loves building companies. He loves building products. More than anything else, he loves building great teams. You should ask him about Mario Kart as well. He's a super gamer. Also, when you come to the Bugsnag office, if you see coffee spilled anywhere, you'll know who's done it.
100%.
And James, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so I'm, as Kitty said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bugsnag. Thanks all for coming, really appreciate it. As Kitty said, this is our inaugural event, and it's great to see you all here. Thanks also to the speakers as well, because it was fantastic to have such diverse sets of slides from people who are solving the same kind of problems. I am a former software engineer, I think is how my team would describe me. I grew up in an era where I learned C and C++, went into scripting languages, and then had a stint as an Android developer and a mobile developer. And along the way, I like to create a bunch of open source technologies and open source libraries. I would not recommend using any of those anymore. There are much better ways to do it. I made a jQuery plugin that is inexplicably still used, and I still get PRs and issues on that repo. I'm going for a world record on number of unanswered issues and PRs, I think, on that. I also made a HTTP library for Android, which was fairly popular before I think Square made a better version. And so that was, people are still using that. I still get PRs to that. Again, don't use it. It's been a while since I've been writing some code. These days I'm mostly focusing on the kind of problems that the speakers were talking about. How can I work with companies and teams to help them figure out the kind of questions that Kitty mentioned that were fantastic in the feedback form, like how do I know when to fix bugs versus features? How do I know how to prioritize these? What are the people problems related to that? Because it's not just tech, it's like once you know the answer to these questions, how do we actually figure out as a team how to get them fixed or not? Before Bugsnag, what brought me out here, I've been in the Bay Area for about 10 years. I worked at a gaming company, ended up being a mobile gaming company, which is how I got to do some Android work, called Hayzap, where I was CTO. And before that, even worked in financial technology at Bloomberg for a few years. So a bit of a storied journey there. But let's see here. Today, I want to talk a little bit about Bugsnag, and I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of software health. And so hopefully most of you in the room know about Bugsnag, but I have to give a bit of context just in case you don't. So we've built a application stability management platform, and hopefully the terminology will become a little bit clearer throughout these slides. But we make error monitoring actionable for individual contributors, individual hobbyists, all the way up to massive enterprises. So people can figure out when to fix bugs or not fix bugs. As Jane mentioned earlier, we're a full stack solution, so we're doing a lot of talking about client side today. But since day one, we've had support for backend applications, desktop applications, mobile applications, even some weird and wonderful use cases. We are used in Apple TV, we're used in Android TV. Some applications that are on your TV are monitored by Bugsnag. So entirely full stack. Really, we're kind of empowering software developers, observability teams, release managers, QA teams to make data-driven decisions. Again, I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of giants here. This is what Jordan was talking about earlier. Rather than being like, this seems bad, going, this is bad, and this is what we're going to do about it. Yeah, people use this data to make ROI decisions, and that's something that we've been really passionate about, my co-founder and I, since day one. He's CTO now, I've been a CTO in the past. A little side story here, when I was at Bloomberg, there was a bug that caused a significant outage, and I was on vacation, and I wrote that bug because, again, tier A software developer over here. So that bug caused the service to die, and no one else knew how to fix it. So they shut down the service for 10 days. And I still have nightmares about that these days. It's like, I come back from vacation and they're like, oh, James, your service that's processing billions of dollars of transactions died. Oh, crap. And that was the olden days. And that's kind of one of the reasons we built Bugsnag. Let's not have that happen again. Let's have everyone understand what's happening and why. Obviously, we've had some great speakers here from some great companies. We process over 1 billion crash reports per day from tens of thousands of applications worldwide, and over 5,000 teams and companies are using Bugsnag these days, including obviously the people who've spoken already, but Airbnb, Slack, Pinterest, Lyft, Yelp, and a bunch of other companies. We'll talk more about that later. So I kind of want to take you guys on a journey of where we started, how this has evolved over time, and where this is going. Various people in this room will be at various different stages of this journey. And so I'll kind of explain that a little bit in a second. But there are a lot of forces of evolution here. So I talk about this a lot. Back in the day, you used to have log management. I'll talk about that in a second. But it didn't work anymore, and so we had to change. And what are these forces of evolution? So the rise of mobile and client-side development, more and more business logic is being moved into the client side. And that is hampered by the fact that the fragmentation is crazy on the client side. So I think that PY mentioned earlier about people don't always upgrade versions in a row, they can skip versions. We talked in the Q&A about the fact that Samsung versus LG versus Huawei, and they have all these differences between the platforms, and they all like to do their special adjustments to core Android. Thanks a lot. And there's no way you can test in every single fragmented environment. Like, it doesn't matter if you're paying thousands, tens of thousands a month to Amazon's device farm, you're still gonna miss devices. Same is true on browsers. Obviously, there are genuinely still people using IE6. We have to support old IEs in Bugsnag as much as it pains us. Also, product engineering teams need to align. We see this as a massive trend across the industry. I'm sure you guys do as well. Product and engineering quite often are odds with each other sometimes. You know, engineering teams sometimes want to fix every single little bug and do tech debt projects and refactor all the time. Product teams want to ship out new features without doing any of that and building a pile of technical debt. And so there's this kind of negotiation that has to happen between product and engineering teams. And so we wanted to make sure that people can align around a single data point. User experience is more important as more companies move their first touch with customers into a mobile app or a website. If you have a crashing experience the first time you download Airbnb, maybe you're not going to book that cabin up in Tahoe. Like, it's genuinely going to make you change your buying habits and your opinion of a brand. And then finally, application health doesn't just mean bugs, it doesn't just mean crashes. And again, I'll dive into that in a second. So, okay, so hands up, how many people know about error logging in the room? Okay, I would hope that's most people. That's the basic part. That's log files. That's piles of data that you have to dig through. And then I imagine hands are gonna keep your hands up if you use error logging, and then put your hands down if you know about error monitoring and stability management. Yeah, what's that thing? And then software health is a broader term. I'll go into that in a second. So this is the evolution, I think, of the way that people should be thinking about the health of your application. So error logging. Everybody should be pretty familiar with this. Applications write out to log files go out to disk. That's centralized in one place. And these days, people are still spending a lot of money on things like Splunk or their own logging warehouse or BI warehouse. Now, that still works great for information security. It still works great for BI. It doesn't work great unless you have a PhD in Splunk, or whatever they call it, a Splunk Certified Systems Engineer qualification. I think that's a genuine thing. And so the problems are, obviously, unstructured data requires a lot of instrumentation and doesn't work on the client side. You can log as much as you like to a client-side device, but as PY was saying, that log cap file is going out to nowhere on a real device. So that didn't work. So we had to evolve. The next layer, and this is where Bugsnag started back in 7 years ago now, we wanted to capture structured data. We wanted to make sure there was no instrumentation required, and we wanted to group these errors by root cause. So that's the basics of this, right? Taking a crash report, use the smart grouping as PY was talking about, look at the stack trace and say, you know what, all of these crashes are caused by the same underlying bug on this line of code. Automatically capture that diagnostic information. Jane was talking about this a little bit. Metadata tabs, you can add custom data, but Bugsnag captures a ton of stuff automatically. Was this Samsung, LG, Huawei? What version of Android was this? On the server side, what web request was being processed? On the browser, a good idea on this one is the IE example. Was this IE6? Should we care about this? And so that diagnostic data is captured automatically in Bugsnag, and then aligning with project management. So log systems was just a stream of data. Once you group by root cause, you can talk about a bug in Bugsnag, which aligns with a ticket in Jira or whatever you're using. So you can align between what used to be the operations team's pile of data and the engineering team's priorities. And there's obviously problems with this, which is why we kept evolving. You could not prioritize errors by customer segments. So we started thinking about A/B test analysis. We started thinking about phased rollouts. We started thinking about customer properties, like this customer is paying us a lot of money and this customer is not. And so when you start pulling that data in, you can start getting a lot more intelligent about things. And I mean, this one, I've got to do a show of hands on this one. How many people's current or previous error monitoring solution was some cobbled together thing that you guys made in-house? Okay, all right, there's a few people, maybe there's the people not putting their hands up out of shame. Don't worry, a lot of our customers did that as well. So we're in this phase right now, and there's still a bit of a way to go. What we're working on building is a stability management solution. And so this has been mentioned in a great way by some real examples from the speakers here. Stability management powers data-driven decisions, right? That argument between, or that tension between product and engineering can be resolved by setting goals, setting targets, and saying, just like with Indu, this is our stability goal. And most of our customers do that as well. So you can say, right, if we're not hitting 99.5% stability, what does that mean? What do we do about that? But you can't have those conversations unless you're actually instrumenting this. If you are hitting that target, that creates other interesting conversations. The product team might say, well, don't worry about it. Let's move on. Let's ship faster. But it does allow you to rally around some kind of central data-driven piece of data. Prioritization with key customer segmentation, right? So a lot of our enterprise customers, a lot of our largest user bases will use Bugsnag, and they will attach data such as, is this person on a trial? Is this person a paying customer? Is this person like we hear sometimes, a tier 10 spender? Someone you want to really look after, give them a custom account manager. But also, is this person a member of an A/B test? I think all of our speakers are using some kind of A/B testing, and you can send that data into Bugsnag and see that inside the Bugsnag dashboard. Actionable insights around releases. We're seeing this job title emerge over the past 10 years of the release manager. The release manager is kind of this negotiator between when is the right time to roll out a release or phase it out from 5% to 100% or a feature going live, or when to roll back. This person typically sits on the product team right next to the engineering team, and they need a dashboard. One of our customers, Lyft, a question earlier about is Bugsnag deployed on production or beta or early environments. One of on the beta team at Lyft, a guy called Billy there sits in the beta version of the Bugsnag stability dashboard to know when new beta versions are healthy or not healthy. And that's a signal for them to roll out that beta to production or phase a rollout. And then I've already mentioned this before. We talk about stability targets and stability scores inside of Bugsnag. We don't just have that number, which is here's how healthy my application is, but we allow you to set targets inside the Bugsnag dashboard. So what that means is we have something called a target stability, which is if everything's going great, we want to aim for this. Then we have something called a critical stability, which is like, oh my God, everything's on fire. We need to drop what we're doing right now. They align pretty well with other, like Google's SRE methodology. They have this concept of SLAs and SLOs. It's pretty common in the industry. That's how Bugsnag is presenting that. You can have an SLA and an SLO for stability. And my co-founder Simon loves this because he genuinely is like, right, our SLA, we need to stop what we're doing and fix everything. Everything's on fire. And the SLO is like, oh, we'll get there one day. One day we'll get there. But it allows you to align your teams together. So there's a lot still to do here. We've got a lot of things coming out. Some of the stuff that Jordan was showing earlier, we actually have homegrown dashboards in the work that look very similar to what Pandora have built in their data pipeline. And we want to start bringing more of that to our customers. But there's another step. After we have locked down stability management, actually Jordan had something on his last slide there, but there isn't, crashes aren't the end of things. So it's not just crashes that you care about. there are different variables involved, and I'll talk about the scorecard in a second, but you've got crashes, you've got application freezes, you've got memory leaks, you've got cold boot time measurement. How long does it take from the app starting to at first interaction on the application? All of these factor in to a healthy software experience. And there's no surprises here, but this is the direction we're going. We're layering this on top, get better at 100% picture for stability management, and over the next couple of years, we're going to be taking over the whole kind of set of the software health functionality. So I talked a little bit about this. The way that I think the industry is going and the way that I think leaders in stability management and application health are going to be thinking about things are along these directions. And again, thankfully, and we didn't align this, but the speakers mentioned some of this stuff already. I was just talking about the health scorecard. Crashes is one part of this. What if you could have on a per release and a per A/B test basis a list of the health score of all of these components? Cold boot time was too long on a release per release basis. The number of, well, another good example that we've talked to a customer about recently is overall network utilization jumped massively between version 2 and version 3. Are we doing something ridiculous there, or is that something actually we intended to do? So I think that teams, health and observability teams, will build health scorecards to cover all of these dimensions. Right now we can power a couple of those, more coming soon. Ownership, a lot of questions came up, and again, thank you for filling in the what do you want to hear about side of things. One of the most prominent categories of questions around ownership. Like, yes, we can monitor things. Yes, we can save stuff in a database and show it on a screen. But what happens once we've decided to fix something? Well, ownership matters. And you have to, this was something that came up in the Q&A and the talks. You have to curate this. You have to have someone who cares. What did you say, Jordan? Bug warrior or something like that? Bug busters. And I think that Airbnb has something called their bug sheriffs. And so there's different ways of doing it. You can have your teams get ownership on their own side, as you were talking about the Square side of things. Look at my team's problems. How can we get better as a team? Or you can have additional resources and help by having a rotation of engineers or a quality engineering team that can layer on top of that. There's no point in finding out the bugs unless you have a path to getting them fixed, and that has to be a team process change. And I think teams are going to start to realize that, because historically, this has been something that's been tossed over the fence from operations teams. Now, no diss to operations teams, but operations teams' job are to figure out when something's broken and then escalating it. If you take that and throw it across the fence without a connecting layer, like Jordan was talking about earlier, it's awful. That's what happened to me at Bloomberg with that big crash. But once you tie this stuff together, you can actually make a change and get something done. And finally, we've been talking about this throughout the whole process here, data-driven metrics. Like, you shouldn't just be sticking your finger in the air and saying, we think something's broken. Pick the metrics, hold yourself accountable to the metrics, continue to measure them, continue to improve them, set OKRs based on these metrics, and you'll be in a good spot. So I think it's on the t-shirt now, actually. Not all bugs are worth fixing. This is something that I think 10 years ago wouldn't have been a mantra. We strongly believe in this. Like, don't fix every bug, fix the ones that matter. I'll give you a couple of examples of this. So SurveyMonkey is one of our customers. They're in the B2B space. They have, I love the visualizations on this. They have people who are creating surveys to pick their kids' soccer jersey color for next season. Then they have IBM, who are spending 7 figures a year with SurveyMonkey. Who do you think SurveyMonkey cares about more on their platform? And so what they are doing with Bugsnag is they are creating customer segments, they are attaching the organization name, they're attaching spend information, and they're creating segments inside the Bugsnag dashboard to show you not just these are the bugs affecting key customers, but in this case, these are the bugs affecting IBM. And the account manager for IBM over there can say, we need to get this fixed because otherwise we're going to be in big trouble. That doesn't just happen in the B2B space. The team at Warner Brothers and a bunch of our mobile gaming companies, and anyone who's been in the gaming space before will know, you have what is known in Vegas as whales, people who spend a lot of money on a platform. Now, I won't say if these are actual real examples or not, but if Kim Kardashian is using your application and she sees a crash, Sure, she might not be spending a lot of money, but she is going to go on Insta and she's going to like completely destroy your product and be like, this sucks, never install this game. Actually, maybe that will get you more installs. Any press is good press, right? But you want to make sure that if you have a VIP customer coming through, they have a good experience. The other problem that we've heard of is what we call the Saudi Prince problem. There are people who have a lot of money who like to spend that money in ways that maybe us in the room don't like to spend that money. For example, spending 6 figures a year on in-app purchases on games. I'm getting a nod over there from Jane. She's seen this before. A lot of companies, especially in the gaming space, will treat these customers as if they were the IBM of SurveyMonkey. They will get flown out for customer events and conferences. They will get a VIP account manager. They will get a way to be invoiced, not via credit card, so they can send an invoice after the fact. It's a whole different world to what I'm used to, but it happens. So you care about some customers more than others. One of the things that I got a lot of questions about on the form was like some use cases. I think a good way to dive a bit deeper will be to jump out to some of the demo stations afterwards, or find everyone with a yellow colored badge from Bugsnag, orangey yellow. But kind of giving a few examples here. Jane mentioned we're full stack. Here's a kind of a quick table for you guys here. We're used across consumer mobile, we're used across B2B, and we're used in mobile, web, backend, and people switch from all sorts of different platforms to get these outcomes that we've been talking about today. There's this one's insane over here. Talking about stability targets with a lot of 9s up front. There's another customer who has a 4-9 target of stability, which is bonkers. But lots of use cases, lots of platforms people are switching from, and also a lot of success stories as well. So if you're wondering about these in a bit more depth, come and grab someone with an orange badge and we'll tell you a bit more information about it. And as I said earlier, we've been talking a lot about mobile today. We've been talking a lot about consumer mobile today, but we're starting to get adoption in pretty much every vertical. Gaming's starting to pick up. All right. That's it. So we're going to dive into a panel session in a second, but before we do that, any questions from the audience?
I had a question about the health scorecard that you mentioned. I think if I understood you correctly, you said that Bugsnag is coming out with some features for that. Is there a place to find more information, or is it still in beta?
So we are new ways of looking at application health are on our roadmap. This is a bit of a longer term thing that we're rolling out, but just to give you a bit of a taster of this, and something Jordan was hinting at earlier, we've introduced a couple of non-crash related things in our mobile platforms. One of them is A&R detection. We detect application freezes, Android not responding, or application not responding, I think it stands for, on Android platforms. And so this isn't a typical crash. What we're actually doing is, under the hood, is we are looking at a secret signal that is being thrown by the Android operating system. We're catching that, and then we're processing it and giving as much useful diagnostic data as possible to say, you're frozen, and this is the code that was running while the freeze was happening, but also all that diagnostics like breadcrumbs and metadata that people have been talking about today as well. So that's our first footstep into performance on Android. The same is true on iOS. We've recently released out-of-memory detection on iOS. It's very, very different to out-of-memory detection on Android. And so we've had to build an entire custom layer to detect those out-of-memory errors. So we're dipping our toes in the water right now. What we're finding is most of our customers are clamoring for more of this. And as almost all the speakers said today, they'll come and bug me and say, we need this in the Bugsnag dashboard. And so we're going to start building on top of that. And that's on our slightly longer term roadmap. The vision, obviously, is to become the leader in application health. And we're kind of stepping towards that over time. As you can probably imagine, freeze detection on iOS and better out-of-memory detection on Android are natural follow-ons from that. So yeah, it's coming soon.
So first of all, I really appreciate some of your software engineering standards because they have made it very easy to do perhaps things you did not intend with your libraries. So related,
that's what PY was talking about, right?
I've actually managed to leverage them for in our development environments, our local development environments, and in our test environments where like we're throwing errors all the time because we're testing. We don't want to send them all. To be able to use your libraries to be able to actually surface that information in a very well-formed, readable way. And so that kind of brings up the question of what do you see as the future for Bugsnag in terms of the entire development life cycle, as opposed to just staging, post-deploy, that sort of thing?
That's a great question. So, but the question was about Bugsnag being part of the full development lifecycle. Well, obviously, a lot of people adopt Bugsnag to get the visibility in production that was completely missing and lacking before. What we actually find is most of our customers will take in, PY talked about this earlier, but most of our customers will take things that they've learned from production and then immediately upgrade their linting, their test suite based on these bugs. And the best practice, I think, for Bugsnag is to start off with Bugsnag running in a pre-production environment and then track bugs as they progress through pre-production environments. In an ideal world, if you detect something on staging, you're not going to push it out to production. That's not actually what happens, though. Things slip through the cracks. And so the way we've built the dashboards is, this is very different if anyone uses Crashlytics or have used Crashlytics before. You have to create a project per release stage in Crashlytics. Bugsnag doesn't have that requirement. We know that code progresses between these development cycles. So you can see if a bug happened on development, then test, then staging, then beta, then production. You can see that progression. Now, a release manager probably would look at that and be like, we've got a process problem. We need to fix that. But what we're finding as well is engineers and engineering managers are taking data back from Bugsnag and writing really, really nice unit tests or integration tests to learn from their mistakes. I think PY, you said earlier about out of memory errors or nullability issues. Was that? I'm not sure who that was. Okay. Oh, that's right. that's a top secret conversation. There's things that you see. We were talking about Kotlin and things like that. So there are patterns that come up time and time again where if you spot those patterns, you can start defensively programming and protecting against those things, or you can upgrade your linting test suites and integration tests to cover that. So I hate this analogy, but the DevOps infinity loop that you see everywhere, it's a loop. It's not a straight line. And if you're not taking any feedback from that right-hand side to the left-hand side, you're doing it wrong. And so I think, again, we try and put that data in front of our customers and in the right place in the dashboard, but it's up to you guys to have good practices internally and do something with it. Hopefully that makes sense. Awesome. Thank you.
Bit of a silly question, but do you use Bugsnag for Bugsnag tracking?
Do. We dog food Bugsnag very heavily.
Do you ever get a loop of crash from?
So my co-founder Simon is very good at this kind of thing. And early days, when we basically had one giant service that was all of Bugsnag, yes, we got loops. About 6 years ago, or even maybe 5 years ago, we split out. So Bugsnag is available as a SaaS product where you can sign up on bugsnag.com, but we also have an on-premise version of Bugsnag. So you can install that Bugsnag in your own data centers. That's for compliance-sensitive customers, healthcare, fintech, defense, insurance, that kind of stuff. So what we've actually done is we report our bugsnag.com errors to our own private on-premise version of Bugsnag. And so if there's never any spinning that happens here. And it just so happens we use that same technique for demo applications as well. So we have our super scalable cloud version of Bugsnag that all of our customers are on. And then we also have mini installs of Bugsnag that we report things back to. So yeah, we have to be good at monitoring because we're a monitoring company, and that's one of the big concerns. But yeah, we've thought about that. Good question. Any other questions? Awesome.
Talking about software health, is there anything you guys are looking at, like even upstream of pre-production in terms of monitoring sort of application health and development environments, developer productivity, that kind of stuff, or have you not really gotten there yet?
So we're trying to stay out of the project management space. That is a very crowded space, and there are people who do a very good job over there. And we're trying to feed data back into the early parts of the development lifecycle. Having said that, there are signals that happen during the build process that we're already starting to capture. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with things like symbolication, but like when you deploy a mobile application, Android or iOS, or a browser-based application, debugging symbols are stripped out when you deploy those to production. And so in different techniques, ProGuard on Android, only if you're using ProGuard. ProGuard on Android, dsym files and symbolication on iOS, source maps on JavaScript. And so what we do is we have Bugsnag in production as an SDK, but we also have hooks into the build pipeline. And so we'll capture those artifacts at build time, upload them, and recombine those with the minified or obfuscated stack traces. One of the things that we are likely to work on in the future is capturing more information at build time and putting it into our releases dashboard. So some things that I think would be very obvious there are, on Android, did my APK file size increase version to version? And now this is something that not everybody monitors and looks at. There's a lot of ways to do this, and there's open source tools out there that can tell you in your CI/CD suite, your APK file size has gone up. Now, I'll use Android as an example, but this is pretty true across all client-side environments. Just like PY was saying that you don't uninstall the payments application, well, you do uninstall the application that is taking up the most disk space. And so monitoring things at build time, like APK size, for example, or IPA size, I guess, on iOS, is certainly something that we're going to put into the releases dashboard. So that's earlier on in the process. I think that this is a result of our releases dashboard becoming a source of truth for the health of a release. We kind of expected 8-9 years ago that GitHub would have a page like this, and then they never built it. They've got this horrible releases tab that nobody uses, and we're like, fine, we'll build it ourselves. And so we built this releases dashboard, and that's kind of meant to be the source of truth for the health of a release. So we do think back to that level. We're not going to think any further back, because I think other people are much smarter than us in that area, and they're going to nail that. So, yeah, cool. All right, any more questions?
I have a couple of questions from the registration
Oh,
form.
yeah, thank you.
This question is from Brendan Weinstein. I don't know if you're in the room or not. Oh, here you are. Do you mind if I read your question where you asked about React? That's great. So the React world seems to be a bit ahead of native developers when it comes to forcing by design a log of all view state changes. Bugsnag improved on Crashlytics by providing by default useful breadcrumbs that should have been standard. What's the next step for Android iOS for perfect bug diagnosing? I think everyone has had the experience of adding in more breadcrumbs. What are we doing in native apps to move beyond that?
That's a good question. So the good news is PY showed some cool things that you can do there with view hierarchy and fragments and things like that. A lot of the things that we put in as default in our diagnostic capture are as a result of spending a lot of time with the customers that are using our product. So we'll be like, for example, I'm going to go back to the product team later today and say we should track which versions you've installed historically. That seems like it would be helpful across the board. And so we have a philosophy on the product team of opinionated but extensible. And so opinionated means we'll add stuff to our product we think that is going to have low overhead and will be broadly accessible and helpful to our customer base. But every customer is different. So it might be that you care about Kim Kardashians and you want to send that data in. And so we always will allow you to add in additional data and instrument yourself. But I do think that on iOS, for example, we track when the view controller changes. We do some basic activity management and fragment analysis that you can hook in. It's optional. You can hook in on Android side of things. But I think that what we want to try and do is capture the user journey as accurately as possible, because one of the things I think is most important in bug fixing is reproduction. You can't verify that you fixed something until you've reproduced it. So if we can give you the perfect automatic steps of here's what the user did up until a crash, that's always what we're going to be striving for. But like I said, sometimes we'll take inspiration from something our customers are doing, or maybe we even get a pull request for it. So that's the goal. One thing that was mentioned earlier is analytics hooks. So most applications or companies will have a series of analytics hooks in their application that is used by the product team. Almost always they reflect the user journey, and so what we recommend to customers is add in those strings into Bugsnag breadcrumbs, and then the product team and the engineering team can align around those steps in the user journey, because that data is Bugsnag's not going to help you do funnel analysis. You're probably going to use Amplitude or Mixpanel or something like that for that. So take those same steps, put them into the Bugsnag journey, but our philosophy is if we think it's broadly accessible, we're going to continue to help reproduce and therefore fix problems. Cool. Good question.
Another one is Pradeep Pathak in the room from Lookout. Oh, you're here as well. Do you mind if I ask your question? He would like to learn more about the continuous health and telemetry monitoring of mobile apps. How is it different from other tools?
Well, we talked about the client side versus server side of things. I think a lot of people on the server side are still using some cobbled together logging system or previous generation error monitoring tool. The client side is a completely different beast. The volume of exceptions is insanely high. The fragmentation of devices is a really, really big problem. You don't control the logging environment and centralized logging environment. So I think that actually we're taking a lot of hints from the client side and putting them back into the server side monitoring parts of our product. Like breadcrumbs, initially we were like, breadcrumbs is great for user steps. But what we've actually done is we've implemented breadcrumbs on a lot of our backend platforms now. So for example, rather than button clicks, you can say, here was an authentication. Then there was a database request that happened, and then a crash happened. So these kind of reproduction chains apply across the whole stack. So I'm not sure if that answers the question directly, but they're vastly different environments, but there's learnings coming from both sides. So it's kind of fun to be full stack. It's hard sometimes because you'll talk to a mobile developer one day, and then you'll talk to a Go developer the next day, and you're like, wow, these are completely different problems that they're solving. But things we learn from one side actually help the other side. So, yeah. Cool.
Is Matt Robinson from Strava here? Can I go ahead with your question? He would like to learn more about the mechanisms and thresholds that other companies are using to inform their release cycle about stability, and then also about attribution of crashes to internal experiments and features, as well as gating.
So I'm going to save the first part of that question for the panel discussion, because I think that's a great one for the panel. The second part of that question, Bugsnag has this concept of custom filters, as we've talked about earlier. You can attach metadata and create filters based on that metadata. One of the things we introduced last quarter was the ability to send in arrays of metadata. So you can say, I am a member of these A/B tests or experiments, and then look and search for a membership of an array in the Bugsnag dashboard. So what we find is, as well as the promotion from beta to production and phased rollouts from 5% to 100%, more and more, Pinterest do this, and I think Airbnb as well, you'll have hundreds of A/B tests and experiments live in production at once. And so if you attribute the membership of an experiment group in that before notify call in your metadata in Bugsnag, you can then create segments of people who are in an A/B test. So that's how we recommend doing that, and that's how most of our, especially consumer mobile companies, do that, and B2B companies as well. All right.
One last one,
more.
and then we'll move on to the panel. Is Matt Blake from Gusto here? Oh, here you are. Can I go ahead with your question? We've answered this in a variety of ways across the speaker sessions as well as yours, but maybe you can summarize it as well, James. So best practices around getting the signal to noise ratio correct in a large scale software system.
Right, so the golden, I'm very opinionated on this. The golden rule is don't fix every bug. Don't think that you can fix every bug. We've seen some examples earlier of like fix the top 10 or whatever it is, and everyone's got their own different thresholds that they'll use here. The way that Bugsnag uses Bugsnag, for example, is we'll have SLAs and SLOs with the stability score. Once we always look at the top bugs, even if we're doing great on the SLA. When something's really on fire, we'll use that to jump in and say, this is a top crasher, just like the team at Pandora do, and then focus on that. We also have a concept of spike detection in Bugsnag. Some customers like Pandora will have more sophisticated systems where they build their own alerting and anomaly detection, but we have this concept of taking in crash data, running an exponential moving average on that data, and then detecting spikes in 5-minute windows. That's a really good way of, there's rarely false positives on that, it's basically never false positives, but if that goes off, you should do something right now, and something's on fire. But really, philosophy of don't fix every bug, embrace the fact that we are not in an era where we have to press Windows 95 to a CD or multiple floppy disks and that's it. You can patch and hotfix. If you combine that with the kind of slow rollout process as well, 100% of your customer base should never be affected by a massive bug because you're going to catch it on the rollout, and you're going to be able to roll back, and it's okay. Basically, be one with the bug, be a bit zen with it, because until you do that, it just feels like someone told me one day that they declared bug bankruptcy. I don't know if anyone's done this before, where you go into your monitoring system and you're like, archive all, delete all. It's a very freeing thing. That's not our philosophy. We give you the ranked prioritization list where you can say, well, these are the top ones. Let's work on these first, or segment it by paying customers, non-paying customers. Pick what you care about, work on the top ones first. So that's our philosophy on that. Great questions. Any more questions? I saw there was a hand up over here somewhere. Maybe I've answered it already. Okay.
There's some more, but I think they're going to be well suited for the panel.
Makes
so
sense.
If I don't hear them come up during the panel, I'll bring them.
Sounds good. So I'd love to invite our speakers up to the stage, and we're going to talk a little bit about how everyone on this team uses Bugsnag or how they manage stabilities.